Although the Arabs and Jews are similar in many ways, conflict has plagued their relationship and ability to exist peacefully in the Middle East. What has divided these two great cultures into a seemingly permanent division without a solution? The Six-Day War of 1967. Join us as we explore this atrocious partition that has taken place in the Middle East. Israel was created in the aftermath of World War II in 1948. The Jews never got along with their Arab neighbors. Both cultures felt victimized. The Jews because of the Holocaust, the Arabs because they felt that Israel's land should belong to them. Due to this, neither could sympathize to the other's problem. The Palestinian word for the creation of Israel is Nakba, meaning disaster. In the late 1960s, Israel put a national water carrier plant into operation. This plan pumped water from the Sea of Galilee to irrigate land in Israel. The United States supported this plan and Israel's actions. However, many Arab states did not support the actions as they would have to recognize Israel as a state, as its existence. A pro-Palestinian movement considered the plan to be imperial and wanted to take action against Israel.
Hatred for Israel and Arab nations was strong. To combat Israel's national water carrier plan, the Syrian military enlisted terrorists to attack Israelis. These attacks attracted much public attention and are a major cause of the Six-Day War.
Egypt and Syria began to initiate the first few steps that would lead to the war. Egypt withdrew United Nations emergency forces that had created a buffer zone between Egypt and Israel in the Sinai Peninsula and in the Gaza Strip. This broke the barrier between the two countries, removing the shield that had been in place for nearly 10 years. Egypt also blocked all goods going to and from Israel through the Straits of Tehran, which was an action Israel had previously stated would warrant military action. Syria also increased border clashes with Israel and began to mobilize troops for combat. The United States believed that a major Arab-Israeli conflict was imminent and pressured Israel to withhold military action until a diplomatic solution was able to be reached. Israel, paralleling the United States' wishes, withheld further militant force. President Johnson stated that the Gulf of Aqaba was international waterway, and the United States attempted to use a maritime force to discontinue blockage of the waterway, which went against earlier diplomatic promises. At the time, the Egyptian president was Gamal Nasser. At first, he did not show his opposition towards Israel. However, as the conflict escalated, he voiced his opinion against Israel. He began to air Israeli propaganda, such as, "The existence of Israel has continued too long. We welcome the Israeli aggression. We welcome the battle we have long awaited. The peak hour has come. The battle has come in which we shall destroy Israel." The Egyptian president caused many of the conflicts that initiated the Six-Day War and definitely became one of the major players in the war. King Hussein and President Nasser signed a mutual defense pact on May 30th, which was followed with a defense pact between Iraq and Egypt. Arab states surrounding Israel began to mobilize troops, and Egypt intensified the propaganda against Israel and Jews. The mobilization of Arab military scared Israel, and they began to ready troops. Although they had previously agreed to wait for a diplomatic solution, the Israelis were terrified of utter annihilation, as many Arab states had called for the complete destruction of Israel.
This is our opportunity to wipe out the ignominy which has been with us since 1948. Our goal is clear, to wipe Israel off the map. In 1964, leaders of the Palestine Liberation Organization created a plan to destroy Israel. Their plan diverted water from the Sea of Galilee, which earlier the Israelis had began to pump water out of the Sea of Galilee to irrigate their land, but the Syrians began building diversions so that the Israelis couldn't use the water from the Sea of Galilee. The Israelis responded to this by firing on the Syrian equipment. Tension rose between the Israelis and the Arabs, and the fighting escalated. Israelis began to use demilitarized zones, and soon after, the Syrians began firing weapons into those zones. Syria also began shelling Israeli towns, and the conflict rose into airstrikes. All this tension between the Israelis and Arabs led to the Six-Day War.
On May 23, 1967, Gamal Nasser, the president of Egypt, closed the Strait of Tiran to Israeli ships. The action contributed to the Six-Day War. On June 4, 1967, Iraq created a military alliance with Egypt, which committed Iraq to war. On June 5, 1967, war broke out between Israel, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. The personal accounts of an Arab named Abu of the Six-Day War were recorded. In an Arab refugee camp, he listened to the radio. It said, Jews would be swimming with the fishes.
I can't wait to go back to the land that the Israelis have stolen from us.
The Israelis have had our land for too long.
In the distance, the people in the refugee camp saw soldiers coming over the horizon.
Fellow brother, how is the war? Ow!
I am not an Arab, I am an Israeli, and we have come victorious!
Israeli fighter planes covered the sky, firing on Arab refugee camps. The Israelis destroyed the Egyptian Air Force and demolished the Egyptian defense in the Sinai Peninsula. The Israelis conquered the Syrians in the Golan Heights and King Hussein's Boudian army in the West Bank. After 132 hours, or 5.5 days, the Israelis tripled their land and gained back the holy city of Jerusalem. On June 10, 1967, Israel agreed to a ceasefire.
After the Six-Day War, Israel gained a sense of power over the Arabs. Israelis wanted to close off their new gained territory to Palestinians. Originally, Palestinians had been living under Jordan and Egyptian rule and care, but after the Six-Day War, the Palestinians were really angry with their leaders because they weren't able to secure the land that they wanted, and they gained a sense of nationalism. The Palestinians broke off into their own country and began following a former Egyptian civil engineer named Yasser Arafat. Arafat sneaked into the new gained Israel territory and led atrocious acts of terrorism. Many Palestinians supported the Arafat and looked to him as a leader. However, years later, the situation had still not changed despite all the terrorism that Arafat committed. The Palestinians finally lost patience and began taking matters into their own hands after an accident in the Gaza Strip when a bunch of Arabs were killed by a Jewish driver. Riots broke out all over the Middle East and violence became very common. In fact, for young Palestinian boys, spending time in Israeli jails became like a rite of passage.
Tension was high in the Middle East after the Six-Day War. After the war had ended, Egypt broke the ceasefire. The fighting continued between the Arabs and Israelis. Egypt and the Israelis tried to make peace treaties. However, an agreement was never reached. Finally, with help from the United States and the United Nations, in 1970, another ceasefire was signed. This treaty was known as UN Resolution 242, which kept peace in the Middle East balancing on a fine point.
In the United States today, the words Muslim, Middle East, or Arab evokes images of terrorist attacks. Terrorism has become a very common fear throughout the world. The Six-Day War may have led to this horrible form of violence. After the war, the Arabs felt victimized and felt that the land belonging to the Israelis actually belonged to them, and then that land had actually been stolen from them. When you lose a nation, you resort to your church, and this is exactly what happened in the Middle East. Young generations of Arab children felt bitter and hostile about the conflict, and turned to extremist Islamic practices, including these acts of terrorism that we see all over the world today.
Although the Six-Day War was a short conflict, not even lasting an entire week, it is a major part of shaping the cultural and political climate of the Middle East. A way to fix this problem is not clearly evident, but understanding the roots of this issue brings us closer to a solution.